With all the old school style games that have been coming out recently, it makes you think, why haven't they tried this sooner? Well, they have, numerous times, ever since games like Duke and Blood, and any other old school boomer shooter or whatever you can think of came out and left the limelight. It's an odd time, and today we're going to be talking about one of those attempts. Shadow Warrior is a series that started back in the Build Engine days with Duke and Blood. It's a first-person shooter that was heavy on challenge and dick jokes, and weird references here. I don't know what the devs were thinking of. But after it had a successful game, it did well for its time. It was kept on the side, mostly because Duke Nukem was considered the more popular one to play, and the one that was getting a sequel. That, when it finally came out, we all know what the Curse of Randy did.
Another victim.
Thankfully, while the Duke is trapped in the hands of a man I'm better off not talking about because it's a barrel you seriously don't want to look in. Shadow Warrior itself was swept away by Devolver Digital and Flying Wild Hog as they decided to make a game together and create a reboot of the old guy. And this was released in 2013, and it was a prequel style shooter done in what I will say is Flying Wild Hog's style of making first person shooters, but with some extra bells and whistles on top to make it more unique. And that's what we're jumping into today. And as a heads up, I understand if some of the footage looks a little bit weird, sadly having to pick the lesser of two evils here because OBS, the program I record with, was having issues capturing the game properly. I mean as in, there was just so much going on it had a little bit of trouble, so it had to lower the quality to keep up. It's the lesser of two evils here, man. Seriously, if I tried the other way it would have had frame drops up the ass. Starting off, I'll say Flying Wild Hog put their best foot forward when creating an introduction to the game. I ain't showing the very beginning of the intro beforehand because, well, I don't want this video to get hit with a big copyright strike that mutes the video. But after that point, it starts with a very nice scene and a nice environment to explore while we get used to the controls. And there's even a few secrets hiding around and some nice nods to the original game hidden in them. And everything's all fine and dandy until we get to what we're supposed to be doing and we get the hired goons sacked on us. Thankfully, we decided to bring an actual sword and not this cheap lump of plastic these guys got sent with. Seriously, what are they using? The melee itself deserves its own talk because it's one of those bells and whistles I mentioned earlier. The melee in Shadow Warrior is an attempt at allowing more complex swordplay while staying simple to use. In the options there are three settings. Basic, which is generally going to be there to allow you to just play the game normally and not have to worry. It'll handle everything for you. There's a setting after that which I can't remember the name of, so I'm just going to say normal, where it dictates the swing of your sword based on things like your movement. So if you're moving in one direction, the sword will follow, which means you have to plan ahead your swings in order to maximize their effectiveness because enemies can block, but you can get around it. And then there is the advanced setting which removes any form of training wheels on you, and nearly all forms of movement will dictate the swing, which means you can get some weird swings going. And this is just the beginning of the swordplay. More gets introduced as the beginning of the game goes on, and it's really good. Honestly, it is apparently possible to play through the entire game with just the sword. I haven't done it myself, so I'm afraid I can't vouch for it, but it is apparently something that can be done. And it's just one of those bells and whistles that I really want to talk more about, but it seems Wang needs a nap, so let's give him a nap.
Let's get something straight.
After a nice nap, we wake up and try to find the man who has the sword we came here for. I mean, seriously, why didn't he take the $2 million? Is that chump change nowadays? But on the way to getting our bearings, we find ourselves a revolver on a dead guy, which becomes the first staple in our arsenal. The revolver, I'll admit, I hated at first. It felt clunky, slow, and a bitch to hit things with. But it's just like using something you haven't used in aeons. After some practice, I'll admit the revolver grew on me, and it's a weapon with high enough power to stay relevant in the game's campaign. In addition to this, we end up meeting Hoji after finding said man we were chasing dead on the floor, our resident sass boy, and our giver of new abilities to boot. he lets us get into the upgrade system, which is something I should talk about. There are 3 upgrade screens, I suppose is the best way to put it. Weapons is simple, there are various upgrades for weapons, and you can buy ammo on these screens if you so wish. Then there is the technique screen, which teaches us things like extra abilities for our katana, or things like extra health, extra money finding, or just various abilities to increase our chances of not dying. And then lastly is the powers menu, which is upgraded with some rare crystals we find occasionally. These give us special powers we can use regardless of our weapon, and it's very handy. It gives a lot of crowd control, and depending on your playstyle, there will be something you can use. Personally, I just kind of like having one crowd control ability I can sort of abuse if I need to. And once all is said and done in the prologue and the first chapter, the game learns that it doesn't need to push on with a lot of story or character development early on. It gives you a goal, and it lets you go on, and on, and on, until you find the Nobusur Kage, and lose the vaccine. What disease I don't know it was for. Thankfully, the story itself is actually quite simple, and a majority of the details are explained to you as you're playing, so it's not a complete mess of a story. I won't go much into it because it's a simple story, and it would just be spoilers if I explained it to you. I'll leave it to that. But let's focus on some other aspects of the game, mostly the arsenal, because that's something that's important in a first-person shooter, goddammit. Now I'm going to hopefully have fitting footage for each weapon here, so if I don't have fitting footage on screen, you have the right to yell at me. First off, we got our katana, which I've talked about a bit before, but there's still some bits I didn't mention. It's alongside with it being a solid and strong weapon, it comes with some shurikens that you can use on your stamina meter, which is weird. How is Lo Wang doing this? How is he getting shurikens out of his ass? Anyway, they're mostly for handling things at a distance, and even if they are inaccurate and do very little damage, they have some uses. In addition to that, there's the abilities you can unlock from the karmic upgrade tree I talked about, with things like a forward thrust, a spin, and basically a demon wave. That's just what I'm calling it, it's a demon wave. You can't tell me it's not a demon wave. And in the end, once you have this and a lot of those upgrades that can increase the damage, it becomes really strong, as I've said before. You can potentially play through the entire game with it only. Next up is the revolver, which I did talk about before, so I won't say much. I will say that the upgrades for it are okay. The extra accuracy is handy, I guess. The extra fire rate is handy. The one I will mention the most, though, is the freaking Yeehaw upgrade that lets you fan the hammer and be a cowboy. Seriously, Yeehaw. These guys aren't even gonna die without saying Yeehaw. Following the revolver in terms of our more simple weapons is the SMG, which we get next. While it's not the most damaging bullet hose you would get in a game, it is however accurate and fast firing, and can be dual wielded once you get an upgrade, which is honestly an odd choice for an upgrade choice. And while the upgrades are a little bit lackluster for the SMGs, it does stay relevant throughout the game. Thankfully it's an accurate bullet hose that can handle the weaker enemies or the annoying flying bitches, as I'll thankfully call them. Now, following the way the weapons have been going so far, you would expect another type of firearm, like a shotgun or something. Nah, you get a crossbow, which at first seems simple. It's accurate, it can pierce possibly, and then you look at the upgrades and see one that does a charge shot, and you buy it, and then you realize you probably won't need the other weapons until way later in the game because that thing is overpowered as fuck. Jesus Christ! Seriously, the charge shot is something I hate and sort of love at the same time because of its power. It can do up to 4 times the damage of a regular shot, and that can one-shot a lot of the enemies in this game, and can stun stuff that it doesn't kill. So it really becomes the primary weapon until you get up to the later ends of the game where you have a full arsenal. I feel like this was a power spike that is just not good. If it was toned down, I feel like the game could have been more balanced about it. or maybe just trade some of the power into the other weapons. I just feel like the charge shot is way too strong, man. And then after the crossbow is done with, we move on to firearms once again, because we get a shotgun. And you can tell how much of a good time you can have with a shotgun within like the first few shots fired. And this one, it's okay, I guess. The spread is a bit everywhere at times. The damage can be a bit hit and miss, but when it does hit its mark, it can shred enemies. And its alternate fire, which can be unlocked, fires all barrels, which can be up to 4, so yeah, take that super shotgun, you got a competition. Nah, not really. The accuracy of this gun isn't that great. It is handy at times when it does work, but you're kind of relying on a coin toss sometimes, which isn't that great. Useful in places, needs some work. So, what do you think would come next? Usually you'd have something explosive. Well, you do, but not fully. You get a flamethrower as your next weapon, which is actually a good flamethrower for once. Usually flamethrowers are either crap or they eat through ammo so fast that it's not worth using. This flamethrower manages to strike a balance of being strong but not eating through ammo fast enough and being a decent crowd control and damage over time weapon. In addition to this, it has an upgrade that lets it fire a projectile, which is honestly pretty strong because it has a large area of effect. And I would say it's a good addition to the arsenal. It gets used fairly regularly in my book. Of course, we're up to our last, well, not last, but our last weapon we're given by the game, which is a rocket launcher. What else would you expect? It's a rocket launcher. It says Duke on the rockets. It's a nice reference. I like it. It may be a bit slow for my tastes, but it's useful. And also gets you killed a lot. Seriously. I died way too much because of this thing. Personally, if I wanted to change the rocket launcher, I would actually lower the damage a little bit in return for giving it a faster fire rate. I just prefer it when the rockets don't take forever to get out of the freaking rocket launcher, man! Seriously. And there are 2 more weapons we can obtain, but these are given to us randomly as we defeat enemies. By defeating the smaller enemies known as lesser demons, they have a chance to drop their hearts, which when picked up can be used as a area of effect nuke around you, which will kill any lesser demons by basically making them explode. It doesn't really work on larger demons, sadly, because, well, they're a lot more hearty. Funny. But in addition to that, the greater demons, mostly the big muscle heads themselves, who I'm going to call generals, drop their heads when they die sometimes. And this can be used as effectively a superpowered laser beam. It doesn't last long, but it pierces, it deals constant damage, and it does have a use. It's handy, okay? And it lets you get ahead of the competition. Okay, I'm sorry for all the stupid puns. Now to me, this game is a case of Flying Wild Hog doing what they know best back from Hard Reset, which is to mix painkiller elements with older first-person shooter elements, which works in some places and doesn't work in others. Shadow Warrior's gameplay itself is solid, each weapon has a use, and each enemy does have a purpose in the game. They each serve their own role. The only enemy I don't like out of the roster is the Summoner, because Jesus Christ, that thing is tanky. It can go invulnerable and revive enemies, and even still summon enemies while it's invulnerable. It doesn't need that much in a single unit. If it just did the whole revive thing or the summon thing, I would be fine with it. But no, it has to have like 50 different things, and it even does poison clouds on you when you're not paying attention. It's annoying. As for the levels themselves, they're okay. I will admit I'm not good at secret hunting, but I will say you don't need to hunt for secrets in order to manage things in this game. Especially since a large majority of the secrets aren't even secrets, honestly. They're very simple. You looked around a corner or you looked under something, and a game just goes, you got a secret. There are some secrets where it's like you have to put definite effort in order to get them, or you have to actively be properly looking around in order to see them. But they're few and far between compared to all the other secrets in the game. My major point I think I have with the game is that its best foot forward approach honestly hurts it. Sure, the game looks great and is a nice romp up until the last third, because then the next couple of levels when the last third starts, it's long, it feels slow compared to the rest of the game. It just feels tiring at that point. The game may pick up after those levels, but taking a long ass time to get there, it hurt. Especially when in one section I got lost in a circle because it was dark. I couldn't see the door. I felt like an idiot when I finally saw it. And the bosses themselves, I don't know. They're typical for a Flying Wild Hog. Big spectacle fights with big weak points that just scream hit me. I honestly do not like that approach, in my opinion. It's just lazy. Sure, it looks nice, it looks interesting, but the fights are trivial. Not only are the bosses easy to take care of, supplies are constantly given to you during these fights on the outer ends of the arena. Even all the arenas are just circles or a square for bosses. There's clearly just, here's a big arena, here's a big guy, go fight it, that's it. There's no unique bosses, they all kind of work the same. And let's talk about something nice, which is the graphics in my eyes. They really do stand out until the last third in that snowy mountain. Fucking that feels like the weakest point. Anyway, the environments themselves, when they do work, are really good. They're detailed, the enemies are designed to stand out so you won't have trouble seeing them. And there's one thing I will say, is that I love cherry blossom trees, okay? If a game has cherry blossom trees, that's a point for me. I like those trees, they look nice. And for a game that was released in 2013, this looks especially well done, even if there are some lackluster points. Okay, this is going to be short because outside of the beginning where insert copyrighted song here plays before the game starts, I don't really recall anything big about the game's music, which is generally a bad thing, and it is here. A game with forgettable music can be seen as a game that itself is forgettable. There's a few tracks I recall that do get reused a bit as the game goes on, and that's about all I can sadly remember. Sound effects, on the other hand, they're okay. I'm putting voice acting in here as well, because that's also pretty decently done. The weapons are meaty and they do sound their part, minus the SMG in my opinion, it sounds a bit weak. But all in all, it's good. Most voice actors do their job pretty well as well. I do like Lo Wang's voice actor, and Hoji himself does a pretty decent job at being a sassy spirit kind of thing, you know. All in all, I feel while the music itself is in need of work, I do think the sound effects and the voice acting at least balance it out so it's at least completely not forgettable. Now I know I talked about the melee before, but I just want to talk a little bit more about it before we end off. I feel the melee in Shadow Warrior has potential to be something special. If it had some extra moves, some bells and whistles to other mechanics, and just had what it currently has expanded upon, the game could have a really good continuation. It could become a really solid game. And in the end I'll say this, it does earn the odd bit of hate this game gets. It has some jank, it has some rough edges all over it. In the end, however, it's also enjoyable in places. The weapons can be a good romp. There's a fairly decent campaign there. It's not super short, that's for sure. And I hope they make more games like this. I know there's a sequel that came out, and I know how it is, so please don't bother telling me. That'll be something for another time. Thank you for watching. I'm always looking for feedback, so if you have something to say, feel free to leave a comment and all that. If you liked what you saw, feel free to like, sub, you know how the freaking YouTube algorithms work. Honestly, I don't get the YouTube algorithms. As long as I understand how to make videos, I'll probably keep doing it, because I find this enjoyable.